Think about this carefully. Why is it that so many men who once lived with freedom, with energy, with a sense of self, gradually become hollow versions of themselves once they step into marriage? This isn't coincidence. It's not simply aging or maturity. It's a system designed to reshape men, to strip away their independence piece by piece, while convincing them that every sacrifice is noble. What once made them strong, loyalty, responsibility, the instinct to provide, becomes the very mechanism that locks them into a role where they lose control of their own lives. Marriage doesn't just ask for compromise, it demands transformation. And most men never realize they're giving up sovereignty until it's too late. The pattern starts small. Their social circle shrinks, not because their friends abandon them, but because prioritizing friendship is recast as selfish. Their hobbies, once sources of joy, suddenly carry a sense of guilt unless they serve family purposes. Free time, the one resource no man can replenish, is consumed by errands, domestic obligations, and invisible labor. Even their money, the literal reward for the hours of life they've sacrificed, stops being their own. It becomes our money, with the wife often assuming quiet authority over how it is allocated. You may think this happens naturally, but it doesn't. It's engineered by a psychological and cultural script that reduces a man's options until his only viable choice is to invest everything into maintaining the relationship. The genius of this system lies in how it manipulates men's better nature. A man wants to be good, loyal, protective, a provider, a father, but those instincts, left unguarded, are turned against him. He collaborates in his own confinement. Every time he swallows his frustration, every time he tells himself compromise is love, every time he silences his own needs to avoid conflict, the chains tighten. Resistance feels selfish, obedience feels virtuous. That is how independence dies, not through confrontation, but through 1,000 quiet surrenders. Our very language exposes this reality. We joke about the ball and chain, taking the plunge, or getting tied down. These aren't random expressions, they are ancient acknowledgments that marriage reduces male freedom. Yet society teaches men to laugh off the warning signs, to dismiss them as exaggerations. But they are not exaggerations, they are masks hiding hard truths. Marriage, at its core, is less about partnership and more about submission, but only one side is expected to submit. The sinister twist is that men are trained to be grateful for this submission. Happy wife, happy life isn't advice, it's programming. It trains men to measure their worth by how well they regulate their wife's emotions. It tells them their own happiness is irrelevant unless it contributes to hers. This dynamic creates an imbalance where one person's peace is sacred and the other's is negotiable. And because men believe love means sacrifice, they willingly walk into servitude packaged as devotion. But the transformation doesn't stop at emotional prioritization. Look at the behavioral shift during courtship versus marriage. Before commitment, a woman maximizes her appeal, frequent intimacy, shared interests, minimal conflict. After commitment, the system reverses. Intimacy becomes transactional, a reward tied to behavior rather than raw desire. Shared interests are abandoned unless they serve family goals. Demands escalate while patience dwindles. The woman who once prioritized pleasing becomes entitled to being pleased. This isn't necessarily calculated malice, it's evolutionary design. Women are biologically programmed to secure commitment and then optimize resources for long-term survival. The man who fails to understand this isn't unlucky, he's unprepared for a strategy millions of years in the making. This brings us to the brutal reality men avoid admitting. A wife's love is conditional. It is based not on who you are, but on what you provide. Lose your job, fall ill, display too much weakness, or simply become too predictable, and the warmth begins to fade. Divorce statistics prove it. Around 3/4 of divorces are initiated by women. They don't exit because of abstract unhappiness. They exit when the cost-benefit calculation of staying no longer serves them. They leave when they believe they can secure better terms elsewhere, or when they've already extracted maximum value from the arrangement. And when they leave, the system ensures men remain tethered. Alimony, child support, asset division, all guarantee that a man continues funding a household he can no longer access. The marriage contract doesn't dissolve at separation. It mutates into a new form of obligation where he pays for love that no longer exists. Freedom doesn't return with divorce, it becomes more expensive, but the deeper damage is psychological. Marriage erodes a man's identity. His thoughts, desires, and goals are systematically placed beneath the priority of domestic harmony. He stops living proactively and starts existing reactively. His role becomes to solve problems, carry burdens, and regulate conflict. Over time, this creates learned helplessness, a psychological condition where repeated exposure to uncontrollable stress convinces you escape is impossible. The married man stops asserting himself because experience has shown him that resistance only multiplies problems. He becomes passive not out of weakness, but out of exhaustion. At this stage, many men develop a kind of domestic Stockholm syndrome. They begin defending the very arrangement that drains them. They claim marriage as a partnership, even when their own lives contradict the statement. They rationalize sacrifice as love, silence as maturity, and unfulfilled dreams as noble duties. They begin to see servitude not as exploitation, but as stability. And because acknowledging the truth would mean confronting years of self-betrayal, they cling to the lie instead. Culture enforces this at every turn. Media glorifies the family man who gives up everything for wife and children. Religion sanctifies sacrifice as divine virtue. Even other men, trapped in the same cycle, shame anyone who dares question the arrangement. Words like selfish, immature, or afraid of commitment are used to silence honest analysis. The system cannot survive if men speak openly about their reality, so it uses guilt and pride to keep them quiet. The tragedy isn't that women exploit these dynamics. The tragedy is that men enter them blind. From childhood, they're trained to protect, to provide, to place others first, but they're never taught to protect themselves from the very exploitation their instincts invite. They are told love conquers all, that devotion is virtue, that family is purpose, but love fades, devotion drains, and purpose cannot come from chains. The moment you make someone else your source of validation, you have already surrendered sovereignty. This isn't about demonizing women, it's about recognizing reality. Women aren't villains. They are following evolutionary imperatives designed to secure commitment and maximize survival. Modern culture and law simply give them sharper tools to execute these instincts. The man who doesn't grasp this truth thinks he's entering a romance. The man who does understands he's entering a negotiation, and in every negotiation, power belongs to the one who can walk away. That is the hidden law of relationships, the truth men ignore until they're already trapped. Here's something most men don't realize until it's too late. The very culture that praises them for being responsible, dependable, and selfless is the same culture that uses those traits to keep them compliant. From the moment you're told to be a man, the script begins. Provide, protect, sacrifice. Those are the instructions. What you're never told is that these values, once weaponized, become the bars of your psychological prison. You're told it's maturity, but in reality, it's surrender. You're told it's love, but in reality, it's leverage. Look at how society celebrates male sacrifice. Movies show us fathers who give up their dreams for their families, husbands who endure in silence, men who wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. Religion amplifies it, teaching that a man's highest purpose is to lay down his life for his wife, to model himself on unconditional self-sacrifice. Even among men, the cycle perpetuates. Older husbands, too broken or too ashamed to admit their own defeat, pressure younger men into repeating the same mistakes. That's just how marriage is, they say. It's worth it. But if it were truly worth it, why do so many of them look beaten down, resentful, or hollow? The truth is that these men can't speak honestly because honesty would force them to confront the years they've lost. To admit that marriage domesticated them is to admit they abandoned themselves willingly. And so the lie continues, passed from one generation to the next. Boys grow up believing that manhood means erasure of the self. By the time they question it, the trap has already snapped shut. The most dangerous part of this system is not the financial obligations or even the emotional labor. It's the psychological reprogramming that convinces men their own needs are selfish. That belief is the lock that keeps the cage closed. Because once you accept that your well-being is less important than someone else's, you will tolerate any imbalance, excuse any exploitation, justify any unhappiness. You'll convince yourself that sacrifice equals love, even when sacrifice has stripped you of everything you once valued. And here's where the cultural programming becomes genius. Men are not only pressured to submit, they're pressured to celebrate their submission. A man who admits he misses freedom, solitude, or sovereignty is branded immature. A man who says he wants to prioritize his passions or protect his independence is accused of being afraid of commitment. Society has built a vocabulary of shame designed to keep men silent. Commitment-phobic, selfish, narcissist, player, these labels exist to pathologize male independence. And it works. Most men cave under the social weight of those accusations, even when they know deep down they're sacrificing their happiness for appearances. But the reality surfaces in statistics that can't be ignored. Married men report higher levels of depression, higher rates of health decline, and in many cases shorter lifespans than their unmarried counterparts. These aren't isolated coincidences. They are signs of chronic psychological stress. They reveal what happens when a man lives year after year with his desires suppressed, his ambitions muted, and his autonomy exchanged for obligations that never end. This isn't maturity, it's slow erosion, and it's disguised as stability because stability benefits the system, not the man. Consider how conditional love plays out in practice. In the early stages, a wife might express admiration for your ambition, your strength, your independence. But over time, those same qualities become threats to the domestic balance. Your ambition makes you absent. Your independence makes you unpredictable. Your strength becomes something to tame rather than admire. What was once attractive becomes dangerous if it doesn't serve her immediate goals. Slowly, she reshapes you into what she needs: a predictable provider, a safe pair of hands, a buffer against stress. And the more you comply, the less she respects you. Because deep down, biology doesn't reward neediness, it rewards strength. The paradox is cruel. The more you sacrifice to keep her happy, the less she values you. This is why nice guys consistently lose. Niceness in this context isn't kindness, it's compliance. It's a signal of low value, of a man with few options and no boundaries. Women may say they want sensitivity and endless availability, but their actions tell a different story. They respect men who hold their frame, who have missions larger than the relationship, who refuse to compromise their identity. They lose interest in men who make them the center of their universe. It's not because they're ungrateful, it's because their biology interprets male neediness as weakness. And weakness kills attraction. Most men misinterpret this dynamic. They think they can fix the imbalance by trying harder, communicating more, giving more, sacrificing more. They believe if they just love her enough, she'll reciprocate. But this is like trying to negotiate with gravity. You can't argue with biological programming. You can only recognize it and choose your response. The hard truth is that the more indispensable you become to her lifestyle, the more dispensable you become as a man. She stops seeing you as an individual with dreams and desires. You become a function provider, protector, fixer. That role may keep the household running, but it drains your soul. It's efficient, but it's not partnership. It's servitude with sentimental packaging. This explains why so many married men eventually look like shadows of their former selves. They're not just tired from work or parenting, they're tired from being erased. They're tired from years of carrying burdens without acknowledgement, from living lives where their own needs always rank last. They're tired because they're trapped in an arrangement that society calls noble, but feels like slavery, and yet they can't speak openly about it without being ridiculed, dismissed, or shamed. So they bury the truth deeper, and the silence eats away at them. But here's where the system reveals its full cruelty. Even when a man wakes up, even when he realizes the imbalance, escape is costly. Divorce doesn't free him, it chains him in new ways, financially, legally, emotionally. He finds himself paying for love that no longer exists, funding a household he cannot access, supporting a lifestyle that excluded him. The very courts designed to ensure fairness guarantee his exploitation continues long after the marriage ends. The trap is permanent. At its core, modern marriage is less about love and more about leverage, and the person with more options always controls the terms. Women, armed with cultural support, legal backing, and evolutionary programming, often enter this arrangement with far more leverage than men. Men, blinded by romantic ideals and social pressure, walk in unarmed. They think they're securing partnership. In reality, they're surrendering sovereignty. And the tragedy is not just that women exploit this leverage. The tragedy is that men are never taught to see it coming. The deeper you look, the more obvious it becomes that marriage functions less as a union of love and more as a mechanism of control. Control over your time, your resources, your identity. And what makes it so powerful is that you consent to it willingly, believing you're building a future. You walk into the arrangement thinking it will amplify your life, but instead, it begins to consume it. What used to define you, your independence, your passions, your friendships, slowly dissolves into obligations that never end. The irony is that you believe you've chosen this path, but in reality, you've been steered into it since childhood by cultural conditioning that glorifies sacrifice and demonizes independence. From the moment you're a boy, you're told stories that set the stage. Fairy tales end with marriage as the prize. Movies portray the man who wins the girl as the hero. Families subtly remind you that you'll never be complete until you settle down. The programming starts long before you even understand relationships. By the time you're a man, you already believe that commitment is the ultimate measure of maturity. So when marriage strips away your autonomy, you don't see it as theft. You see it as proof you've become a real adult. That's the brilliance of the system. It convinces you to confuse domestication with growth. But pay attention to what actually happens to men in long-term marriages. You see them making excuses for why they can't pursue passions anymore. You see them avoiding social invitations because their time is no longer their own. You see them shrink, not expand. What should have been a partnership becomes an arrangement where the man functions as laborer, provider, emotional regulator, and problem solver. And he accepts it, because rejecting it would mean confronting the possibility that everything he sacrificed was for nothing. That realization is too painful for most men to face, so they cling to the illusion. This illusion is sustained by a powerful feedback loop. Men are praised for giving more, for being selfless, for putting family first. But they are never rewarded for being whole, independent, or self-fulfilled. In fact, the man who dares to put himself first is attacked. He's called selfish, irresponsible, or even toxic. That's how the system enforces compliance, not through physical chains but through social shame. When you fear the judgment of your peers, your family, or even your partner, you stop questioning. You fall in line, convinced that your suffering is proof of your virtue. Meanwhile, women are encouraged to pursue fulfillment, independence, and self-expression even within marriage. They're told they deserve happiness, that their needs matter, that their emotional state should be prioritized. And when they feel unsatisfied, society tells them it's valid to walk away. That's why women initiate most divorces, not because they are inherently cruel, but because they are empowered by both biology and culture to prioritize their own benefit. Men, on the other hand, are taught that leaving is failure, that walking away makes them quitters, that enduring unhappiness is a badge of honor. The contrast is staggering. The psychology behind this dynamic is devastating. Men enter marriage believing they'll gain love and stability. Instead, they often gain a role that defines them not as individuals, but as functions. Provider, protector, fixer. These roles are necessary, but they consume the man's identity until nothing remains outside of them. Ask many married men who they are, and they'll answer in relation to their family. Husband, father, worker. Rarely do they describe themselves in terms of passions, dreams, or individuality. That part of them has been eroded, replaced by function, and the longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to even remember who they once were. This erosion explains why many married men feel invisible. Their labor is expected, not appreciated. Their sacrifices are obligations, not gifts. Their identity is acknowledged only when it serves the household. Over time, this creates a kind of existential emptiness. A man can live decades providing, solving, carrying, and still feel unseen because his value is measured only by his utility. He ceases to exist as a man and becomes a mechanism. That emptiness is why so many men appear lifeless, drained, or hollow. It's not that they stopped caring about life, it's that life stopped caring about them. And yet, despite this, men remain loyal to the illusion. They rationalize their sacrifice as love, even when it feels like slavery. They tell themselves they're protecting their children, even as their own health collapses. They insist they're doing the right thing, even while resentment eats away at them silently. The programming is so effective that even in misery, they cling to it, because to admit otherwise would mean admitting they lost years of their life to a system that never valued them. Nowhere is this more evident than in how men handle conflict in marriage. At first, they assert themselves, trying to voice needs or set boundaries. But after repeated clashes, they learn resistance only leads to arguments, silent treatment, or withheld affection. Eventually, they stop pushing back. They avoid conflict at all costs, telling themselves it's better for the family. What they don't realize is that this pattern creates learned helplessness. They begin to believe their needs don't matter, their opinions don't count, and their only role is to maintain peace. Over time, they lose the ability to even imagine a life where they are prioritized. This is why many men defend the very institution that exploits them. It's not that they believe marriage is perfect, it's that they can't confront the possibility that they've been complicit in their own erasure. They cling to the narrative of sacrifice because the alternative, admitting defeat, is too painful. And so, generation after generation, the cycle repeats. Men silence their doubts, pretend everything is fine, and pressure the next generation to step into the same trap. But if you strip away the illusions, the truth is harsh. Marriage, as it's structured in modern society, isn't about unconditional love, it's about conditional utility. It's not about partnership, it's about leverage. And the man with fewer options, the man who depends on the relationship for meaning, always loses. That's why the first step toward freedom is understanding that your value cannot come from being indispensable to someone else, because the moment you become indispensable, you become replaceable. You stop being a person and start being a function, and functions can always be replaced. The tragedy is that so few men are willing to face this truth. They'd rather drown quietly than admit they're shackled. They'd rather call it love than confront the reality of servitude. But awareness is the only path out. Until men see the system for what it is, they will continue to sacrifice themselves willingly, smiling through their own erasure, believing they are building a life when in fact they are giving one away. Here's the darkest secret men eventually learn. If they learn it at all, The system was never designed to care about their happiness. Not in dating, not in marriage, not even in family life. Their role has always been utility. Society runs on male sacrifice. Men build, protect, provide, and maintain. And in exchange, they are offered the illusion of love and legacy. But look closely, and you'll see that what they're really offered is responsibility without freedom, duty without gratitude, and service without recognition. It's a trade that benefits everyone but the man who makes it. You can see it in the way culture frames male value. A man isn't respected for who he is, but for what he does. His worth is measured in paychecks, protection, problem solving. If he fails at any of these, his value plummets. That's why so many men fear losing their jobs or their health more than anything else. They know, consciously or unconsciously, that their place in the relationship depends on their ability to perform. Contrast that with women, whose value is reinforced culturally and legally even when they leave. This asymmetry isn't an accident. It's the foundation of the entire marriage system. The emotional toll is devastating. Men enter marriage full of dreams, but by midlife, many of them live in quiet despair. They don't talk about it because vulnerability is punished. They don't act on it because duty is glorified. Instead, they carry it silently until it turns into depression, health decline, or resentment. Studies consistently show that married men often die younger and live with more stress than their unmarried counterparts. This isn't because they lack love. It's because they live with chronic psychological strain. Their identities are consumed, their desires dismissed, and their sacrifices taken for granted. Over time, that pressure kills not just their spirit, but their body. What makes it even crueler is that men are taught to blame themselves when this happens. They believe they failed to communicate, failed to provide enough, failed to be attractive enough. But this is an illusion. You can't outwork a system designed to drain you. You can't negotiate with instincts hardwired by evolution. You can't earn unconditional love in a structure built on conditional value. The harder you try, the deeper you dig your own hole, and the more you sacrifice, the less respect you gain. This is why men who put their wives at the center of their universe often lose them. Not because they weren't devoted enough, but because devotion without boundaries signals weakness. Women may claim they want endless attention and sacrifice, but their biology reacts differently. It respects independence, admires strength, and desires mystery. The man who erases himself to please her may win approval, but he loses attraction. And once attraction fades, respect follows. That's when the marriage either collapses or mutates into cold cohabitation where intimacy is dead, but obligations remain. The only escape is sovereignty. A man must reclaim his identity before entering or within any relationship. That means building a life so fulfilling, so grounded, that no partnership becomes a necessity. It means developing purpose outside of family, passions outside of approval, and strength that isn't contingent on someone else's validation. This is not cruelty, it's survival, because the man who doesn't need a relationship to feel complete is the only man who can enter one without being consumed by it. But sovereignty isn't easy. It requires rejecting years of cultural conditioning. It demands enduring loneliness while building inner strength. It means facing shame, ridicule, and misunderstanding from those who are still trapped. People will call you selfish, they'll call you afraid, they'll try to guilt you into conformity. You must learn to withstand that pressure without caving, because on the other side of that resistance lies freedom, the freedom to choose relationships based on enhancement, not necessity. And here's the paradox: the less you need relationships, the healthier they become. When you no longer rely on someone else to fill your voids, you can engage with them authentically. You can love without losing yourself, care without being controlled, give without being drained. Women sense this difference immediately. They may resist it consciously, but their biology responds to it. They respect men who maintain their frame, who hold their standards, who cannot be manipulated through guilt or emotional pressure. They invest more in men who are not desperate for their validation. That's the hidden irony. The man who doesn't chase is the one who's chased. The man who doesn't beg for respect is the one who receives it. So where does this leave you? At a crossroads. You can continue down the traditional path, accepting the scripts handed to you, sacrificing your autonomy for an arrangement that benefits everyone but you. Or you can wake up, confront the uncomfortable truths, and begin the work of reclaiming your sovereignty. One path leads to quiet resentment, to years of being drained while smiling through it. The other leads to freedom, not freedom from connection, but freedom to choose connection on your terms. This choice is not about bitterness or cynicism. It's about reality. It's about refusing to play by rules that guarantee your defeat. It's about recognizing that love, as society defines it, often masks exploitation. Real love doesn't require erasure. Real partnership doesn't demand servitude. Real intimacy doesn't punish independence. If it's not built on mutual respect and enhancement, it's not love. It's a transaction dressed as romance. The philosopher Schopenhauer once said that true happiness comes not from needing others, but from being complete without them. That principle applies more today than ever. The man who makes marriage his source of meaning has already lost. The man who views it as optional, who engages only when it enhances his life rather than consuming it, maintains his power. He doesn't seek validation. He doesn't beg for permanence. He chooses connection because he wants it, not because he needs it. That difference changes everything. And that's the final truth men must face. The system isn't going to change. Culture won't suddenly start prioritizing male happiness. Laws won't be rewritten to balance fairness. Women won't stop following evolutionary instincts. The only variable you control is you, your awareness, your choices, your willingness to step outside the script. Most men won't. Most will surrender quietly, calling it maturity, mistaking resignation for wisdom. But some will choose differently. Some will build lives so compelling that relationships become additions, not foundations. Some will stop confusing servitude with love, and those men, rare as they are, will discover a freedom most can only dream of. The question is whether you'll be one of them. Will you accept the illusions handed to you, or will you confront reality, however uncomfortable it may be? Will you live as a function, or as a man? Will you surrender your sovereignty for comfort, or will you claim it, even if it means walking alone? The choice defines everything, because one path leads to psychological slavery, disguised as devotion. The other leads to genuine freedom, where love becomes possible only because it's no longer necessary. The decision is yours.